Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about waking up at 4 in the morning, it may seem at first like just another productivity trick, another hack for squeezing more hours out of the day. But it is not. It is something far more profound. Waking up at that hour is not fundamentally about sleep patterns or time management. It is about discipline. It is about learning to place your will above your whims. Because the truth is, every one of us is engaged in a daily battle between what we want now and what we want most. And discipline is the bridge between the two. At 4 in the morning, that battle is at its sharpest. The bed is warm, the world is dark, your body craves the comfort of staying put. And yet, if you stand up, if you resist that pull, you have already won a victory before the day has even begun. That victory is not trivial. It is a declaration that you are not ruled by your impulses. You are not merely a creature reacting to comfort or fatigue. You are capable of commanding yourself, of saying, "I will rise because I said I would." That single act reshapes how you see yourself. You cease to be someone who negotiates endlessly with excuses and begin to be someone who follows through, regardless of difficulty. Think about how most people live. They move according to whatever mood sweeps over them. If they feel tired, they sleep longer. If they feel anxious, they scroll their phones. If they feel lazy, they procrastinate. In other words, their lives are not directed, they are dragged. But discipline changes that dynamic. Discipline is the art of standing up to yourself, of refusing to be a servant to your weaker instincts. And it begins in small places, in the daily, invisible struggles. Waking up early is one of those struggles. It seems small, but it represents something massive: your willingness to put principle above preference. There's a reason why nearly every philosophical and religious tradition has emphasized self-mastery. The Stoics taught it. The Buddhists practiced it. The Christian monks woke before dawn to pray. Why? Because they knew that a life without discipline is a life chained to chaos, and the man, or woman, who cannot master the smallest things will eventually crumble under the weight of the greater trials. If you cannot rise at the hour you promised yourself, how will you keep your word when the stakes are higher? If you cannot govern your own body in the morning, how will you govern your destiny? Now, some people hear this and think discipline is about rigidity, about denying all joy and living like a machine. But that's not it at all. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. It is the precondition for freedom. Without discipline, you are enslaved to impulse. With discipline, you gain control. It is like the strings of a violin. Without them, the instrument makes only noise. With them, it creates music. Discipline channels your life in the same way. It gives structure, form, and power to your potential. And waking up at 4 a.m. is a very practical, very tangible way of embodying that principle. It is measurable. You either did it or you didn't. It doesn't leave room for excuses. You cannot talk your way out of it. The bed either released you or it held you. And when you win that fight day after day, you build a reservoir of confidence that nothing else can give you. You begin to look at challenges differently because you know you have already proven to yourself that you can overcome resistance at its most primal level. There's also another element to consider. When you rise before the world, you are doing what most people will not, and that separation matters. It places you in a category apart, because excellence always requires that you live differently than the masses. The crowd chooses comfort, the few choose discipline, and the rewards are never equally distributed. So when I tell you to wake up at 4 in the morning, I am not prescribing a number on the clock. I am urging you to practice mastery over comfort, to build the kind of character that stands tall in the face of resistance. Because every time you silence the voice that says, "Stay in bed," you awaken another voice that says, "You are stronger than you thought." And that is a voice worth hearing every single day. Remember, this comfort is seductive, but it never leads to greatness. Discipline is demanding, but it will carve you into someone formidable. And sometimes the first and most powerful step toward changing your life begins simply by refusing to press the snooze button. Discipline over comfort, that is the choice. Make it at 4 a.m. and you'll make it everywhere. If discipline is the decision to rise when every part of you wants to remain in bed, then what comes next, the silence of the early morning, is the reward. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the world is still asleep. The streets are quiet. The phone is silent. Notifications are not pulling at your attention. And that silence is not just the absence of noise, it is a presence in itself. It is a space that invites you to think deeply, to hear your own mind without interference, and to confront the thoughts that during the day are drowned out by distraction. Most people never experience this kind of silence because from the moment they wake up, they are immersed in noise. They check their phones before they've even left the bed, flooding their minds with the opinions, anxieties, and agendas of other people. They turn on the television, they rush into obligations, and the quiet voice of their own conscience is immediately smothered. But when you rise before the chaos begins, you create an environment where reflection becomes possible. And reflection is not some optional luxury. It is essential if you want to live intentionally rather than reactively. Think of it this way: the mind, like a pool of water, only becomes clear when it is still. If it is constantly disturbed by endless movement, noise, and stimulation, you cannot see through it. The silence of the early morning allows the waters of the mind to settle. It gives you clarity. In that clarity, patterns become visible. You see what matters, what doesn't, where you've been, and where you need to go. It is in those moments of silence that people often make the decisions that change the trajectory of their lives. But silence does more than clear the mind, it strengthens it. We live in an age where distraction has become the greatest enemy of depth. Our attention is fragmented into pieces so small that many people can no longer concentrate on a single task without reaching for their phones. But attention is power. What you give your attention to grows stronger in your life. If your attention is constantly divided, your life becomes scattered. If your attention is focused, your life gains direction. And the early morning silence is the perfect training ground for that kind of focus. You might read in that hour, and the words will sink more deeply because your mind is not fatigued. You might write, and the thoughts will come more clearly because you are not competing with interruption. You might pray, meditate, or simply think, and in that sacred space, insights will emerge that would never appear in the clamor of the day. This is not mystical, it is practical psychology. When your brain is not assaulted by stimuli, it can do its highest work, synthesizing, imagining, planning, and creating. There's a reason why some of the greatest minds in history cherished the early hours. Writers, philosophers, generals, and leaders throughout the centuries have sworn by the clarity that dawn brings. It is not that they were superhuman, it is that they made use of something that is available to everyone: the silence before the world wakes up. And perhaps most importantly, this silence gives you space to hear yourself. In the constant chatter of modern life, we often forget what we actually think, what we actually believe, what we actually want. We absorb the noise of the crowd, and we mistake it for our own voice. But when you sit alone, in the dark, before the day has started, you encounter the raw truth of your own existence. That can be uncomfortable, because it confronts you with your weaknesses, your fears, and your doubts. But it also confronts you with your potential, your vision, and your strength. In that silence, you can ask yourself the questions that matter. Who am I becoming? What do I truly value? What is the next step that I must take? These questions cannot be answered in the rush of the day. They require solitude, and solitude requires intentional space. Waking up early provides exactly that. So, don't underestimate the power of silence. It is not empty. It is full of possibility. It is a weapon in a world that wants to scatter your attention into fragments. And when you seize it, you gain an advantage that most people will never know. The world will always pull you in 1,000 directions. But in the silence of 4 in the morning, you have the chance to decide your own direction before the noise begins. Use it well. Those who master silence master themselves, and those who master themselves shape the world. If discipline is the foundation, and silence is the environment in which clarity is born, then what follows is the harvest, the sheer compounding power of time. When you wake up at 4 in the morning, you are reclaiming hours that most people never use. And at first, that may not seem significant. What difference could 2 or 3 extra hours possibly make in the vast scope of a lifetime? But that is precisely the mistake, because greatness is never built in one sweeping gesture. It is built through the consistent investment of seemingly small amounts of time multiplied over years. Think of it the way you think about money. If you put a small amount aside every single day, the immediate effect is almost invisible. But give it years, and the interest compounds until it becomes something remarkable. The same principle applies to your hours. If you rise early and dedicate those hours to growth, those invisible days begin to accumulate. You read 1 chapter, you write 1 page, you train for 1 workout, and in isolation, none of these seem revolutionary. But stacked day upon day, month upon month, the results are extraordinary. You become someone that others look at and call lucky, when in reality, it was never luck. It was consistency hidden from view. The tragedy is that most people underestimate time. They waste their mornings in bed, their evenings in distraction, and then they wonder why their life looks the same year after year. They are waiting for a breakthrough, a sudden transformation, a single opportunity that will catapult them into success. But breakthroughs are almost always the byproduct of compounded discipline. The author who wakes at 4 has already written a book before others have written a page. The entrepreneur who rises before dawn has already built the foundation of a business, while others are still pressing snooze. The athlete has trained for thousands of hours in silence before anyone sees them on the stage. What looks sudden to the world is the accumulated weight of unseen effort. There is also a psychological transformation that occurs when you consistently claim those hours. You begin to see time differently, not as something that slips away uncontrollably, but as something you can actively shape. Each morning becomes a daily reminder that you are not powerless, that you can carve order out of the chaos, that you can move steadily toward what matters. That sense of agency is crucial, because without it, people fall into despair. They begin to believe their circumstances dictate their future. But when you deliberately take hold of those early hours, you are proving to yourself every day that the future is not just something that happens to you. It is something you build. And what you build with those hours compounds not only in productivity but in character. You are training endurance, patience, and vision, because compounding requires faith. You don't see the results immediately. You may spend months waking up early, working in the dark, with little to show for it. But in that process, you learn to trust effort over outcome. You learn that your responsibility is to sow the seeds and the harvest will come in time. That kind of faith and consistent effort is what separates those who endure from those who quit. Consider also the opportunity cost. If you spend those hours doing nothing, you are not just neutral, you are falling behind. The world is moving forward, and you are standing still. Every morning you sleep away is a morning you could have spent shaping your mind, strengthening your body, or advancing your goals. And over years, that negligence accumulates just as powerfully as discipline does. Time compounds in both directions. It will either work for you or against you. And you must decide which. So when you wake at 4 in the morning, remember you are not merely gaining extra hours. You are leveraging a principle that governs all growth. Small actions repeated consistently transform into massive outcomes. That is true for money, for health, for skill, for wisdom, and for character. You cannot escape the law of compounding. The only question is whether you will let it build you or bury you. The difference between those who achieve and those who only dream is not usually intelligence or talent or opportunity. It is often nothing more than the daily accumulation of quiet hours stolen from sleep invested while the world is still. That is the hidden force behind extraordinary lives. Time compounds, and every early morning you claim is an investment in the person you are becoming. Claim it now or lose it forever. Identity is not something you are handed at birth. It is something you build, brick by brick, through the choices you make every single day. And one of the most powerful ways you shape that identity is by the sacrifices you are willing to endure. When you wake at 4 in the morning, you are not simply adjusting your schedule. You are making a statement about who you are and what you value. You are saying to yourself and to the world, I will not bow to comfort. I will not live at the level of mediocrity. I am the kind of person who chooses growth over ease. That act of sacrifice, repeated daily, becomes a cornerstone of your identity. Human beings are narrative creatures. We live by the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Some people wake up every morning with the unspoken story that they are weak, that they are victims, that they are incapable of change. And every time they press snooze, every time they avoid the difficult task, they reinforce that story. But sacrifice writes a different story. When you get up at 4, despite fatigue, despite the temptation of comfort, you reinforce the story that you are resilient, disciplined, and capable of enduring hardship for the sake of something greater. That is how identity is forged, through evidence, through action, through sacrifice that proves to yourself who you really are. You cannot separate sacrifice from meaning. Every meaningful achievement in history has been purchased at the cost of comfort. The artist sacrifices leisure to master their craft. The soldier sacrifices safety to defend his people. The parent sacrifices freedom for the sake of their child. Life is structured so that meaning always demands a price. And when you willingly pay that price, when you choose to rise early, to give up comfort, to structure your life around responsibility, you align yourself with that eternal truth. You begin to see that sacrifice is not punishment. Sacrifice is the path to becoming someone worth being. There is also something deeply psychological in this. When you refuse to sacrifice, when you cling to comfort, you know it. You carry the knowledge, often unconsciously, that you are betraying your potential. That knowledge festers into guilt, into self-doubt, into resentment. But when you sacrifice deliberately, when you say, I will endure this difficulty because I have chosen who I want to become. You generate a quiet pride, a confidence that cannot be given by others. You no longer need external validation because you have already proven to yourself that you are someone capable of demanding more from yourself than the bare minimum. And it's not just about the act of waking up early, it's about the ripple effect. Each time you conquer comfort in one domain, you strengthen the identity that will carry into every other domain. The man who wakes up at 4 learns that he is not the slave of his impulses. That same man, when faced with the temptation to give up on his goals, will remember that he is not a quitter. The woman who sacrifices comfort in the morning will find it easier to sacrifice distraction in pursuit of focus or instant gratification in pursuit of long-term fulfillment. Identity built on sacrifice becomes a shield that protects you when life inevitably tests you. And life will test you. It is not a matter of if, but when. You will face seasons of loss, of challenge, of deep struggle. And in those seasons, comfort will offer you nothing. But the identity forged through sacrifice, the knowledge that you have chosen difficulty and survived it, will carry you through. You will not crumble because you will already know yourself to be someone who endures. This is why the small act of rising at 4 in the morning carries such weight. It may look trivial to an outsider, but it is not about the clock. It is about the kind of person you are becoming. Every morning you wake early, you make a small but significant sacrifice. And that sacrifice becomes a declaration of identity. I am the one who chooses growth. I am the one who pays the price willingly. I am the one who endures. And that is the point. You don't just wake up early to get more done. You wake up early to become the kind of person who can face life without flinching. The kind of person whose identity is not fragile, but forged. Every sacrifice writes your story. So choose carefully, because in the end your life will be nothing more and nothing less than the sum of the sacrifices you were willing to make. So, if there is one truth to carry with you after this, it is that waking up at 4 in the morning is not just about time, it is about who you are becoming. It is the daily act of choosing discipline over comfort, of claiming silence over distraction, of leveraging the hidden compounding of hours, and of forging an identity built on sacrifice. Every morning, the alarm rings, and that moment becomes a test. Will you bow to the weakness that whispers, stay where it's safe, or will you rise and declare, I am stronger than my impulses, greater than my excuses, and capable of becoming more than I was yesterday? The world belongs to those who wake before it, who prepare before others even begin, who refuse to live at the mercy of comfort. You can be one of them. But it requires that you make the choice, not once, but every single day. So tomorrow morning, when that alarm goes off, remember this, it is not just a call to get out of bed. It is a call to step into the life you were meant to build. Rise early, rise with discipline, rise with purpose, and rise knowing that every dawn you conquer brings you closer to the person you were destined to become.